Can I just remind Councillor Saxon, Dankirk, and just you've got your microphone now. You can turn them off now. Thank you.
We're now live on YouTube and it's 7 o'clock.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's meeting, Wednesday, the 3rd of February, 7 p.m. by Zoom. Agenda item number 1, minutes of the last meeting, which are attached. Page 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55.
Moving, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second the Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Billy Brooks. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2, to note apologies received by the Town Clerk prior to the meeting. Town Clerk, please.
Mayor, we have apologies from Councillor Burnham, Jimmy Brooks and Emson.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 3, to receive any declarations of interest. Councillor Dankirk.
I failed to remove my hand, sorry.
Okay, thank you. No declarations on agenda item number 3. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, public participation, none received. Moving on to agenda item number 5, the Town Mayor's announcements and correspondence. All the details are available on the Council website, Facebook and Twitter site. As you all know, we're still in lockdown and there's not much going on. It was sad to hear that Captain Sir Tom Moore had sadly passed away yesterday. He's been an inspiration to the whole nation during these very difficult times, and he will be always remembered. So condolences to the family and everybody that knew him. Okay, moving on to agenda item number 6, the late Councillor Jim Carpenter, the Deputy Mayor, to pay respects to the late Councillor Carpenter and consider a fitting tribute. Just quickly before we move on, Jim was a friend, and as we all know, to us all, and it's going to echo around the room tonight, I'm sure, we're certainly with some new councillors that met Jim for the first time when they stood at elections with him. He was an everybody's person and he was for Skegness, and I think that will reflect in other people's views, especially the new councillors. Thank you. Anybody wishing to speak? Councillor Dick Edgington, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are members of this council that have known the late Jim Carpenter a lot longer than myself. I only met Jim when he joined the authority a few years back, but I found him a very likeable chap. He didn't have any malice within him, and I thought that was quite refreshing. And he had a rather zany sense of humour, so he and I bonded, pretty early on. And the fact that he's been taken away he's lost his life far too early, and it's a tragedy for Kath and for his family. And I think that his loss will be felt within the town. And speaking for myself, as I say, I think that notwithstanding the fact that I only knew him relatively a small number of years compared to other people on this council, I think his loss is a tremendous loss to council and to the community, and of course his family. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Anderson, please.
Thank you. Yes, I've known Jim for 38 years. We worked together at Lincolnshire Road Car, National Bus, back in the early 80s. And I've known him when he first came from Scunthorpe. I met him at St Mark's bus station in the canteen, where Kath used to be with her mother, running the canteen there for employees. So I've known Jim an awful long time. Jim is a very genuine, sincere person. and he worked up a career in public transport industry. He used to be a driver. We went different ways. I went on a career through the union, and Jim went through a career in management with Lincolnshire Road Car. I've always respected Jim, and likewise he respected me. We were great pals. Yes, he was a good people's person. I introduced him to stand in the elections. That was back in the 2000s, early 2000s, when he was successful in gaining election to Skegness Town Council. I know he was my deputy mayor, and during my father's illness, before his death, Jim stood in for me and my family and Jackie on many occasions, for, when I had to go to London to help my family and my dad, who sadly passed away. But Jim always said yes to me, which I greatly appreciated, and Kath did exactly the same. I just want to add, because I've said what I've had to say, both privately, but people ought to know how much Jim cared for Skegness. Skegness was his adopted town. His birthplace was Scunthorpe, but he cared about the community in Skegness, especially public transport. And he always banged the drum to make sure we had good public transport system in Skegness. And it was a pleasure working with him when I was a county councillor in doing that. And we secured many a route that people enjoy now around the town, thanks to Jim Carpenter, or should I say, Councillor Jim Carpenter. Mr. Mayor, I'll stop there for now because I'm getting a bit emotional. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can only echo what Councillor Anderson and Councillor Edgington said. Really, I know I got to know Jim when my dad worked with Councillor Anderson and Councillor Carpenter on road car, and he was always joking to start with, but he always had a smile. I've known him since I was a kid, and I couldn't say a bad word for him. I couldn't have a bad word for him. And as Councillor Anderson said, he cared about Skegness. I'm going to stop there because it is an emotional time. Everybody feels the same, I'm sure. So, I don't want to just keep going over and over, but he will be sadly missed by Skegness and particularly this council.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Tye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've known Councillor Carpenter for many, many years, and I can tell you he was a total gentleman. He will always be sadly missed by all the people of Skegness and all the groups that he worked with. Fantastic man. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saxon, please. Your microphone, Councillor Saxon. Microphone.
Yes, I reiterate what everybody said, but because I was deputy mayor when Jim was mayor, and we did a lot together, and Kath, and of course, when we were caravanning down in Sheringham, Jim and Kath had a caravan there, so we spent many weekends together. And like people say, a lovely bloke, life and soul. He will be sadly missed in Skeg. Sadly missed. Cheers.
Thank you. I did ask that we emailed in with ideas of how we could do a remembrance for Jim. And just before I hand over to the town clerk, because the staff have ideas and things, I did have ex-councillor John Byford contact me and explain that Bad Gandersheim had been on the phone, saddened to hear the sad news, and that a tree will be planted next year to pay tribute to Jim, also Alan Crawshaw, and many more that have lost their lives. This will be done. It will be a similar tree that has been planted already by a lot of old councillors will know, apparently, in the Compass Gardens, like we did for them to remember people who had passed away. The planting of this tree will actually take place, hopefully, in 2022 during the State Garden Show that's being held in our twin towns. So that'll be nice. So if I could hand you over to the town clerk, I believe he'll have some more information.
That's good news.
Just on behalf of the staff team, it came as a great shock and with great sadness that when we heard that we'd lost Councillor Jim Carpenter. Jim was actually on the recruitment panel when I was appointed, and I can remember back that he was one of the people who really took trouble to put me at ease, and that continued through the time I knew him, 10 years. He always treated staff with a great deal of respect, and he, echoing what Councillor Ty said, true gentleman, but just a really nice human being. And even though we knew a few days before he passed that he was seriously ill, it still came as a great shock to the team, and we're still feeling it now. We thought as a staff team what would be a fitting sort of tribute to him, and as officers we would like to ask the council give permission for us to put a tree in the council's garden of remembrance. We have a tree ready and available to put in there, and perhaps council would like to honour him with a plaque alongside that. It's somewhere peaceful in Skegness. We do have lots of people go there to remember their loved ones, and I think because he was very much involved in those early discussions when we started to transform the cemetery, that would be a fitting place to put a tribute. I also thought for those that may wish to remember him in a different way, his mayoral charity was the St Barnabas at Home hospice, and I know that they're desperate at this moment in time for support because they've lost about £1 million worth of contributions over the last year due to COVID. And again, if anybody wants to look at somewhere appropriate, that might be an appropriate place to place a donation in his memory. So, and that's all I have got to say really, other than I would ask council for permission to put the tree in the garden of remembrance.
Thank you. It is a sad time. Anybody watching out there, it is a sad time. It's hard for us all to take in. Emails are still exchanging, and we still can't believe it in conversations. What the town clerk has just said, I would like to propose that we make this happen as a council to pay our respects, and that is a way forward for this council. Councillor Richard Cunnington, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd either propose or second that the tree is planted. And regards the second option of donations, if it would be acceptable, would I be able to donate my next payment of councillor allowance to the charity? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that will be easily done. The town clerk will come back on that. And also, just quickly, yes, these charities are struggling. My charity is one of my charities, which we're still trying to save money for. It's been a very difficult time, but they'll be getting a sum. I've got two charities. One of them is St Barnabas, local, as you know, the charity is, and that's being kept on the coast. We was agreed. We did have meetings, myself and Louise, and that was agreed that we keep the money on the coast. So hopefully there'll be some more money coming forward. Councillor Anderson, you've still got your hand up, or did you put it back up? Sorry. You got your microphone off, Councillor Anderson.
Sorry, I left my hand up. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. They've got little yellow hands. I just spotted them at the last minute. Town clerk regarding Councillor Cunnington.
as long as we have something in writing from him to say that that's, you know, an email will be fine to say that that's what he wants to do, then we can make the appropriate donation in that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll sort that tomorrow for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what the town clerk suggested, I proposed, and it was seconded by Councillor Cunnington, that we do this remembrance for Councillor Jim Carpenter, our deputy mayor. That's news is still rocking us. So all in favour, please show. Thank you, that's carried. Agenda item number 7. Schedule of payments for approval. The list of the payments are attached. Councillor Edgington. Oh, Councillor Dennis, sorry. You might want to declare, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the clerk should now put me in the waiting room. Need to declare an interest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Dennis, in the waiting room. You've all got your schedule of payments for approval in front of you. Are there any questions? Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, just basically for council's information, I did send the town clerk a email, just basically on questioning the software figures, but he has kindly responded with a detailed explanation of what software we're paying for. Some of the figures on there are monthly and yearly, so we've ironed that out, but the information is there. I did suggest maybe sharing it with council, but that's council's decision if they need that information. Thank you.
Okay, are you proposing that we adopt these, Councillor Finlay, for approval? Councillor Finlay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Thank you. Just a quick question to the clerk, which I asked last time. Has there been any movement regarding business rates with East Lindsey District Council? Thank you.
Town clerk, please.
The business rates we have checked, and we are not eligible for business rate relief, is my understanding.
If you wish to come back, Councillor Anderson, you've got your microphone. You still got your microphone off, sorry.
Sorry. Does that include the cafe?
The cafe is part of the overall building. It's not a separate unit. It's valued as part of the overall building, and they look at our total property holdings and then the rates that we pay on all of those. And unfortunately, my understanding is that the regulations don't permit us to get relief on it.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed for approval. Do I have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second them.
Thank you. Do all in favour, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 8. Can we bring Councillor Dennis back in now, please, 10 o'clock? Thank you. Questions to the Mayor. Agenda item number 8, none received. Agenda item number 9. Questions, comments from Lincolnshire Police Representative. Question from Councillor Richard Cunnington. Also, Councillor Mark Anderson submitted just the same question. How many fines or convictions have been issued in Skegness in relation to breaches of COVID-19 rules or regulations? Did we have a reply, Town Clerk? Oh.
Unfortunately, we've not had any communication since the questions were submitted. I have got a meeting that was scheduled in for tomorrow with them, so I can raise questions as to why they hadn't responded or submitted apologies at that meeting.
Okay, thank you. If you do get a reply, if you could forward that on for us, great. Councillor Sue Blackburn, you got your hand up. Was it from last time, probably? Or did you wish to speak?
I wish to speak.
No,
Thank you.
no, I didn't. I haven't lowered
No.
it.
Okay, just checking. Councillor Anderson, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Can I just ask if Councillor Cunnington and myself will carry this forward to the next meeting, full council meeting, because it is important, Mr. Mayor. You know, with new mutations of COVID around, and to be honest, I've lost 5 family and friends lately, and the last person to pass was my brother-in-law just this Saturday morning. So, you know, and we've had the deputy mayor as well. So it is relevant that we ask these questions, and again, in the public, so the public know the answers, and we have the chance to scrutinise the police as well, because they are the enforcement on this issue. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Cunnington.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm just slightly disappointed with the police because I asked the question at last full council, so they've had plenty of time to get us an answer. We did express at the meeting that we knew they couldn't answer there and then, so they could have done something by now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll get that looked into and hopefully get an answer through and passed on to all the councillors. Moving on to agenda item number 10, reports from council representative to outside bodies, none received. Agenda item number 11, reports by district and county councillors, none received.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask a question, please? Have you had the meeting with the county council regarding the A158?
No, we have not yet. There is a date penciled in. I've seen the email. Maybe the town clerk has got the date. I have seen.
I believe, Mayor, it's the 15th.
The 15th. I didn't want to answer incorrectly, Councillor Anderson, but it is arranged then for the 15th. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 12, management committee meetings. You have all those in front of you.
Yeah, I'll move in, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second them, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kirk. All in favour, please show. Thank you. Agenda item number 13, a response from the motion on the service at Skegness Hospital, which is attached. To note the letter received from Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group, Lincolnshire Community Health Services and United Lincolnshire Hospital Trust. Councillor Anderson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was my motion, which was supported by the Town Council. And I'd like to thank the Town Clerk for his correspondence and the reply back from the Lincolnshire Health Community Trust regarding Skegness Hospital. We've also seen the results of the consultation, which the Town Clerk actually gave us from residents of Skegness. And I do believe 72% of that consultation of people, residents in Skegness, were concerned about the closure of Skegness in the middle, and I repeat, in the middle of a pandemic. I'm a bit concerned also about, in the reply from the chief executives, I'm talking about 3 here who've signed the letter. That is the Chief Executive, John Turner, Maz Frosch, who's the Chief Executive of Lincolnshire Community Health Services, and Andrew Morgan, United Lincolnshire Hospitals Trust, and John Turner, as I said, from the NHS Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group. In it, they say that we residents can phone for help because we have no medical cover at night. 111. Now, if anybody has phoned 111, it is a call centre in Sheffield. What I'm asking for, and I guess what the residents were asking for, is a medical service, not a call centre based in Sheffield, who are people who are not medically trained to deal with an issue. I myself have known during this pandemic many people, residents, who've gone to Skegness Hospital with a young child who they were concerned about because they were running a temperature, etc., only to find it closed. and having or not wanting to go to Boston A&E because of the situation at Boston A&E during the COVID pandemic in the A&E department there. I find this totally unacceptable that we, a population of 23,000 people, have no medical cover during the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm just flabbergasted that this has happened in the middle of a pandemic. And, you know, to say that you can call 111 and book an appointment when it's opened. If you've got a young child who's in pain, okay, but not serious, that you need, or if you have a fall, or if you're bleeding, or any of the issues that can be patch and mend at the urgent treatment centre, you have to wait in pain for it to open, or travel to Boston, where all the COVID is in that hospital, in the A&E department. I just find it incredible that this has gone on. What I can say now, I want to make sure that we get back the hospital treatment on a 24-hour service. If we don't, then like we did in the 90s, we will start a petition of thousands of people wanting to sign this petition because of the treatment of a public service to the people of Skegness, and that is our NHS provision here in our town. I'm not having a go at the amazing work of the doctors and the NHS health professionals. What I'm saying to the chief executives and the trust boards is that you've made a wrong decision here in taking away medical cover for us here in Skegness, and you should be ashamed of what you've done. Not only have we had to deal with a pandemic, but also we have had no medical cover during the hours of 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. in the mornings. That is unacceptable in the middle of a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Councillor Danny Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor Anderson. I think it's a bit poor. We've had no hospital treatment on a night since last March, and that's going forward to this March. And I just think when it gets to March, will they be saying, oh, well, let's put it a little bit further. You know that we're in a pandemic. We've got to cut costs. We've got to cut corners. But why should cutting corners make Skegness suffer? You know, they've built all these Nightingale hospitals elsewhere in the country, yet they can't even keep our urgent care open. I just think it's poor service to Skegness, as per usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, I'd like to echo a little bit what Danny's Councillor Brooks has just said. If I've read this right, what they've kindly sent us, we're not getting the services back to the 31st of March this year, but there's no, like you say, there's no confirmation whether that's definitely going to happen or not. I mean, I think it says on here the Lincolnshire Clinical Commissioning Group commissions all these services, and closing it to the 31st of March is bad enough, but is there any way that we as a council can approach them, or somebody somewhere must know if that's definitely going to open before or after that date, or whether it's definitely going to be reinstated back on that date, those services? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I actually have some sympathy for the writers of this letter, purely in they say that we've made this closure to allow us to transfer staff to support other areas facing additional pressures due to the impact of COVID. And they name community nursing and the inpatients wards, which is great, but I'd like to know how many people have actually transferred over to do that and how many are actually now working in Pilgrim, because I appreciate they are under pressure. But as Councillor Anderson quite rightly said, if you have an emergency and ring 111, which I had to quite recently, all they tell you to do is go to Boston. Well, you know, as during the winter months, the A52 is not a great road to start with the debris on from tractors, but add a little bit of ice on that, maybe a little bit of snow, and all of a sudden you've got something which a lot of people in Skegness, a journey they will not want to make in the small hours of the morning. So whilst I have sympathy for the letter, the reasons behind it, I'm sure those who campaigned for Grantham A&E got a similar sort of letter with similar promises of when that would reopen. And look what's happened there. Delay month after month after month. So I share the concerns of my colleagues on this council that if they say the 31st of March, it has to be the 31st of March. That isn't something which is up for negotiation. Oh, COVID is still bad, so it's going to be April. Because of course we have Easter, the Easter weekend. And if things are allowed to open up, you know, April time, we'll have more people around and we'll definitely need that service. So whilst I have sympathies, I don't like the letter because I'm sure it's rather than Skegness, it could have quite easily said Grantham A&E, but I have concerns that the 111 service is totally inadequate when your nearest place where you can get treatment in the middle of winter at 3 o'clock in the morning is 25 miles away.
Thank you. Councillor Saxon.
I quite agree. John Turner is the man to write to. He's the man that makes the decisions on opening and closings. And to be fair, there's no staff. It doesn't. There's no staff. There's no staff at Skegness Hospital at the moment in both sides. The reduced staff they're either off with stress or off with COVID and it's collapsing in Skegness. And if this happens. If we ever do get back to getting our visitors back, just think of the impact that's going to have with 250,000 caravan people in. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? You wouldn't do it, would you? You couldn't have a hospital closed. Even in the daytime, they're working on reduced staff. Unfortunately, I had to go a few weeks ago, and 4.5 hours, and it looked like there was nobody in there. There's 3 nurses and one doctor, and nobody waiting to go in, and the waiting time still 4 hours. So it really needs looking at, and it needs looking at that with some urgency. Thank you.
Councillor Cunnington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, totally agree with everything all the other councillors have said. I'd just like to take it one step further, though, to what Councillor Kirk said. I'm aware of a number of our residents, myself included, who do not drive. So although these roads are treacherous and very, very dangerous at that time of night in those sorts of conditions, if you can't drive, you can't even get there full stop. And this is very concerning because they're the times of the nights that people probably can't get in touch with family, friends, colleagues. We don't have taxis running half the time through the night like they should do. There's no public transport. So it's just impossible. So you've got 8 hours of impossible travelling.
Thank you. Councillor Sid Dennis, please. And just remind Councillor Saxon, you've got your microphone on, Councillor Saxon, still. Councillor Dennis, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question to the town clerk, please. Is there any way we can evidence the throughput of the loss of the 24-hour service, of how many people have been diverted to Boston? Is there any way we can get evidence to what fellow councillors consider a risk? Can we get any evidence of that, of what impact the town is going through?
Thank you. Town clerk, please.
I am not aware that there is any such information that we hold. I mean, I would imagine that the NHS themselves would have indications of how many extra people they may be getting to Boston Pilgrim or to Lincoln Hospital that would have otherwise been treated at the non-emergency centre. It's going back to the comment that Councillor Finlay made. It's very difficult, I suspect, for them to predict when the numbers would change. As we see on TV each night, hospitals are still at a level of capacity that was above the peak of the first wave. And when they made the decision to close, it was nowhere near that peak at that time. So if you follow the logic of their decision, then I can't see them changing that until the peak level has reduced back, or is at least on a downward trajectory to reduce below that. That doesn't help here, but I would imagine that that is going to be their thinking, because otherwise it means that the decision they made from their point of view wasn't the right one.
Thank you. That answered your question for now, Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dan Kirk, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question for the clerk again. Is this something that potentially a freedom of information request could obtain?
Town clerk, please.
Possibly, but I suspect that the actual statistics probably run many months behind by the time they're compiled, etc., etc. So, and they do eventually. The total numbers go into the public domain at some point, but it's quite a long way down the track. So that it would be quite easy for them if that information is available and is going to be published, then they could always fall back on the route that this information will be published in the future and therefore we won't respond. No, whether in what detail they keep the information anyway, whether it's at a detailed level and whether they could tell specifically whether somebody's not come from Skegness or has come from Skegness rather than going there, or whether they've come from somewhere else.
My point, if I may come back, is historically, if we're able to look at but this is with my data analysis hat on, if we're able to see a couple of years of historic usage when it has been open, we could make an assumption that that is the average of service that has been impacted. If we're talking thousands in a calendar month, or whether we're looking at 5, I physically haven't got an idea. I'm wondering if something like that could be useful. Does that help, Councillor Dennis?
Councillor Dennis.
Can I speak there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it does help. What I'm concerned about, if there's a problem, a big problem, then we need to fix it, and we've got to evidence what we're fixing. That's my issue, and maybe a freedom of information request could possibly help. But I'm also well aware that the fear of crime can cause more problem than the crime itself sometimes. And just want to know that we're on the right track and we're not just he said, she said, they said, and let's get some proper evidence. And as you said, if there's thousands or if there's 5, and I would appreciate if we could evidence what we're trying to say to the NHS and the CQC. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Saxon.
Yes, it's a problem, isn't it? Is there a lot or is there a little? Is it worth saving a few lives or is it not? But the problem is now they've got with both Boston and Skegness is the bed capacity. They've got empty beds. They've got empty beds. The problem is they haven't got the staff to monitor the beds, and they've got to have a certain amount of nurses for each bed, which is not happening at the moment. It's below what they should have by law, really. So what's happening is they might have 3 beds in a ward.
Breaking up, Councillor Saxon. You might want to turn your video off. Seem to have lost Councillor Saxon at the moment. Are you there, Councillor Saxon? No. We can't hear you, Councillor Saxon. You're breaking up. Just like to give it time to catch. I'll bring Councillor Mark Anderson in and then try and come back to you. Councillor Mark Anderson.
Thank you. Can I just help, if that's acceptable, some people when I was on the trust board with United Lincolnshire Hospitals, and Skegness Hospital was under the ownership of United Lincolnshire Hospitals at that time. In answer to Councillor Sid Dennis, the figure of number of Skegness residents is not just the Skegness residents that the hospital is for. It's for Skegness and the surrounding areas. And the surrounding areas can be up to, okay, Mablethorpe, all along the coastal patch, Alford, Burley Marsh, right the way through from Wainfleet, etc. That is the surrounding area that the Skegness Hospital it supports, the community. And that hasn't changed. What has changed is it is not a full-blown A&E. It never was a full-blown A&E, but it was a staging post, as what Councillor Saxon said. It kept people alive before they were transferred to Boston. But that facility is not there now. So if you had a heart attack when United Lincolnshire Hospitals were there, you were taken to Skegness Hospital, given drugs, and then moved on to Boston Hospital. But that doesn't happen now. What Skegness Hospital is a patch and mend hospital. Same as what we have for our GPs here in Skegness. And we know the issues here in our GPs in Skegness. If you can't get a GP, call a GP out at night, you go to Skegness Urgent Care Centre, where you will be seen by a nurse practitioner who is one step below a doctor. That's what's in the urgent care centre run by the community trust. They can issue drugs, not life-saving drugs, but drugs that the hospital has to reduce pain and other issues. But we don't have that facility. We don't have GP cover at night. We have no medical cover. So if you're talking about is there going to be 40 people going to Skegness Urgent Care Centre at night? No, there probably won't be. There may be only half a dozen one night. There may be one night. Or there may be 20 on a Friday night, or there may be 10. But it's there for a service for the community, which we all pay for. And like a councillor said, Councillor Cunnington said, not all people, especially elderly, have the use of a car. So where do they go? They wait in pain, hopefully, to get a GP appointment in the morning, which we know how hard it is to get a GP appointment in the morning. Virtually impossible to have on the same day. That's why it's so important to hang on to what we've got and to support our community in this. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Dunkirk, did you put your hand back up, or did you want?
I did, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, we need to move this forward. We're all in agreement that any sort of drop in service is hugely problematic and significant for our residents. We all agree that. How can we move this forward? Now, we need to be able to write back with the facts and the data, like Councillor Dennis said. So that means that I'm going to need to propose that the clerk do a little bit of digging to see if that is publicly available, that information, so that we can draw some sort of factual based persuasive letter or whatever we want to do. But before we can do that, we need to see the facts, see the data, as Councillor Dennis has said, and use that and try to hope that. So I'd like to propose that the clerk does a little bit of digging, see if we can find any publicly available data. If not, putting in a freedom information request to find out what sort of if it's available. I don't know the sorts of cases that come in. Or obviously, this is where it gets difficult with my data protection hack, because if you've got really small, really small numbers, it's very difficult to say what they came in with in fear of it identifying who that person was. So I appreciate there are going to be issues, but I'd like to know roughly in an average month of February, how many people use that service in the hours in which now it's closed. Yes, I agree with Councillor Anderson that even if it's one, it's still significant. I get that, but until we can write back with some sort of response, we're not really doing anything. We're just hot airing things. So I'd like to propose that if possible, and hopefully I'd get a seconder. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Adrian Finlay.
Yeah, I agree what Dan Kirk says, Councillor Dan Kirk says regarding plucking up the information, and obviously, like Sid said, Councillor Dennis. But with or without, rather than keep wasting time going around in circles, I think if that information is available, then great, we'll move forward with it. But if it's not available, I still think we need to contact them regarding the urgent care services, because it's exactly what it says it is. It's urgent. And like some of the other councillors have said, the last thing you want to do is go into a mother or a parent with a child that's had an accident, go into a panic and a frenzy, end up rushing off to the hospital to find that there's nothing available. And then you've got another further half an hour to get in a queue, which potentially could cost lives. But ultimately, it's an urgent care centre, so it's needed urgently. And whether it saves one life or 1,000 lives is irrelevant. For me, it's needed just to say, if it saves one life, then it's done its job. And every life's important, whether it's one life or 1,000 lives. So for me, I think if the information is not available, we should still contact them, confirming it's going to be open by the 31st, like Councillor Steve Kirk says, that it's going to be reopened by the 31st and no longer, and sooner if possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cunnington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I fully understand the comments from Councillor Dennis and can agree that, yes, if we've got a fact, it's far better to go with. So on this occasion, I would support Councillor Dan Kirk's proposal that we look for some facts, but hopefully can we enhance on that? And I think the fact that we need is literally over the past 2 years, because it is March to March now, so it's a full year. So for the past 2 years prior to this COVID year, how many patients have actually visited Skegness Hospital between the hours of 10 a.m. and 8 a.m. 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. That simple fact of how many have visited over the course of a year between those hours would give us a fact that we could fire at whoever we're putting it to, that this is how many people have visited there over the course of a year during those hours. And I would support Councillor Dan Kirk.
Thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the people that sent us the letter should have that information available, and if they haven't, it would be a disgrace to shut a hospital not knowing how many people go there on a night. They should have that information, and they should, if it is as they are saying, you know, there might be one person using it in February, and would be better off sending out the people to the Pilgrim because they're overstretched. They should have that information, and if they haven't got it, then it's even worse, a disgrace, because they've shut an hospital without knowing. So we should only just write back and say, what were your figures that made you shut the hospital? Why? Simple as that. If they say, well, only one person used it for the whole of February, you can perhaps understand it. If they say, well, we haven't got them figures to hand, or we don't know, then that's even more of a disgrace, because it could have been 1,500. We don't know, but they should know. Otherwise, they shouldn't have shut the hospital.
Councillor Anderson, did you want to come back, or did you leave your hand up from last time?
No, I wanted to come back very briefly. I think my concern is under knowing the NHS and where the managers work. They will give us the figures for Skegness residents. They won't give us the feeder for the, the amount, as I said, the areas, surrounding areas that the Skegness Hospital uses. I mean, you won't get those figures, because you can't say a person from Alford, okay, would go to Boston, or would they come to Skegness? They won't include those figures, but 9 times out of 10 they would have come to Skegness rather than go to Boston, because there's nothing at Louth as well, because they've shut Louth. Or would they go to Grimsby, or would they go to Lincoln? So they will skewer the actual figures. I think where we need to be asking, myself, we should be asking our MP these questions. That's what he's there for. We should be asking him to ask these questions on our behalf to the trust, because he's got direct access. Where we come from, we will have doors shut in our faces, basically. I know this for a fact, but an MP writing questions or asking questions will get a direct answers from chief executives and trust boards that make these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know you've got a proposal on the table that we asked the town clerk to go and see what data he can find. My concern with that approach, I'm not saying it isn't something we should do as well, but my concern with that approach is it's now the first week in February, the speed that councils and health trusts work, we're not going to be able to do anything until sort of April, May time. So I would rather, in the first instance, we write back to these three people, expressing our understanding of their needs to move staff around during a pandemic, but expressing a request that they give a concrete undertaking in writing to this town council to say that the urgent treatment will be open no later than the 31st of March. So a concrete undertaking by them that it will be open again, because by the time the clerk has written and sent that letter, it's gone to a PA, been open, sat in the desk for a few weeks. That won't come back to us. We'll be looking to have that letter back by time for our March meeting. If we're then asking for freedom of information, that's another 28 days on top of that. That'll be to April. So whilst I have no issues with us writing, asking for the data, I think in the short term, we should be sending a letter, as I suggested, expressing our understanding of the move they've broken, but wishing for a concrete assurance from them in writing to this council that the urgent treatment will definitely be open no late, so definitely be open 24 hours a day, no later than the 31st of March. That is a proposal I would like to make, please, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I'm happy enough to second that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Danny Brooks.
Can I just, yeah.
I was just going to second that motion, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Saxon, you've got your microphone on.
Yes, I'm ready to speak.
Oh, right. I can't see you with your hand up because I can't see you. Would you like to speak? Put your microphone off now.
Yes, I'll put it back on now. Yes, but not the video off. And yeah, John Turner, with a lot of experience with this, Councillor Dennis will tell you that he used to come and address hospital wash on occasions, and he will twist and turn any figures you like. I think the town clerk's got plenty on his plate at this time of year to be asking for figures which you'll not get, not true figures, you'll not get them. It's a matter of the way worded when they were closing it, it would be reviewed on the 31st of March. Not that it would be opening. And I agree with what Councillor Kirk says. We need a definite date and not a review. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ty.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I completely concur with Councillor Steve Kirk. The way to go forward on this is to write and tell them we want a definition of its reopening on March the 31st. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dunkirk.
Thank you. As it's a substantial amendment to my original motion, I'm going to drop it because the new one fits everything and further. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So it's been proposed by Councillor Kirk and seconded. Was that seconded by Councillor Anderson? I think. Yeah. All in favour then, please show. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 14, the town clerk's report is attached. Note the town clerk's report on various issues relating to the council's operations under the current lockdown. Town clerk, please.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to face some changes in what we expected to happen at annual council this time round. We don't know at this point in time whether or not the virtual meetings will be extended beyond the current beginning of May limit that's in legislation. It will require primary legislation for that to happen. I understand that NAUC and also the bodies representing the LGA, etc., representing principal councils are lobbying government for those changes to be made. So I think there's quite a likelihood that our annual council meeting will be a virtual meeting. So that means it will be quite different to those that we've held before. Now, this time last year, or at the time the pandemic was announced and the various bits of legislation, the government took the decision to set aside a lot of the requirements to hold certain meetings, and so we didn't have to have a annual meeting in the way that we normally would, and we did our business throughout the year, amending various policies and things that we considered as part of that May agenda. This year also, as already discussed, with the death of Councillor Carpenter, who was Deputy Mayor, that means that the agreed succession route to becoming Mayor has changed, and that Councillor Burnham would be the next in line to be Mayor, with Councillor Billy Brooks as the Deputy Mayor for the coming year. So there's quite some changes afoot, and there is also the difficulty in terms of making sure that both Mayor and Deputy Mayor have had the appropriate training to be able to chair meetings and act as chairman of the council. So we need to think over the next, between now and March, April, how we're going to move forward, how we would manage an annual meeting, and what the format of that meeting is going to be. Now that we need to involve those that are going to be proposed to be Mayor and Deputy, but I think it would also be worthy of some input from the rest of Council in terms of shaping that as we move forward. So this is really a sort of early warning that that's going to happen. We also probably looking at there now being 2 by-elections in May for the seats that are now vacant, and those will probably happen at the same time as the county elections. The East Lindsey District Council have been notified that there is another vacancy, and they in due course will be putting a notice of vacancy out. That will happen once a little bit of time has passed, just to allow, as we've done today, respects. Looking at the situation regarding trees, I've reported before that I would be going out to tender on this. It's actually proved a lot more difficult because the potential value of the contract. I was looking to put it through a government website which advertises contracts, and once you reach a certain threshold, we have to do that. It's not only part of our financial regulation, it's actually part of the regulations that are put down on us. I've experienced some problems with that particular website, and there's very little knowledge within Lincolnshire as to what's happening with it at the moment. There have been some changes for printable councils in relation to Brexit, but the same changes don't appear to have been applied as yet to town and parish councils. And that means that the other government website, Seek a Tender, isn't yet available to us. So that there's an issue and problem there. We've got some urgent works that need to be done, but I know from experience in trying to source tree surgeons who have the appropriate experience and qualifications in this area, that it's quite difficult to do. Now, in relation to the trees that we've got on the walks, so Vine Walk and Coronation Walk, there are some trees in that area that we need to deal with. So these are non-ash trees. These are difficult areas to get into, and we know that East Lindsey have some urgent trees that are ash trees that they will need to be dealing with at the same time. So I've approached East Lindsey and asked them if they could assist us with this process, and they've agreed that they would. So effectively what can happen is that the procurement for the whole piece of work in these areas, so it's just on the Vine Walk and Coronation Walks, can be done as one, and that means that the work can easily be coordinated as well, because it will be one single piece of work to do it. Otherwise, we would have to be having an agreements between the two in terms of when contractors go in, how they operate within the same area, potentially at the same time, which would be quite difficult to manage. So I've agreed with them that they will undertake the work, and then they will invoice us for our portion of that. And there will be complete visibility on the invoices from the contractors as well. So that just makes it a little bit easier for us. And it also means it gives us more time in terms of concentrating on the other trees that we have to manage in places like King George V Walk, in some of the play areas in Westway and other areas where we have trees. So that takes away some of those urgent issues from us. So, sorry. So that will be a small package of works for those urgent trees. Moving on to the insurance update, we have reported previously about the long-term policy, but when we actually check this as part of our annual check, it's actually not until next year. We actually renewed it for a full term when we took the asset transfer, so that's why it's out of sync with what we had expected from the previous renewal. So hence our diaries were not quite synced in with that, but we've sorted that out now, and it will be next year that comes renewal. The vehicle insurance renewal is annual, and the Deputy Town Clerk can update you on the policy details for that.
Yes, it's that time of year where we need to renew our motor insurance. As we've grown, that is becoming more complex, because now not only do we have 3 vans, we have 3 ride-on mowers that are registered for road use, so road legal. And I've struggled to find providers of motor vehicle insurance that will insure ride-on mowers that will be on the public roads. You can get insurance, agricultural insurance, if you're driving those mowers on your own farm, on your own land, but getting them for road legal ride-on mowers has been very difficult. I did quite a bit of research. I've approached 4 companies, and I've only managed to get 1 quote from that, And I also got a quote from our current provider. Our current provider still came out cheapest, about £140 cheaper than the other quote. So we're going ahead with our current provider. That's going to cost about £2,639 for the year. As I say, that's for a fleet of 6 vehicles. But any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
So, Mayor, the recommendations are in 3.1, so that the report's noted that I start to look at the potential scenarios around the annual council, and I think it would, as I say, it might be useful to not only the proposed mayor and deputy mayor, but also perhaps some past mayors in terms of getting their feel for it. That the report on trees be noted and the actions that I've taken be adopted, and that the insurance update as set out by the Deputy Town Clerk be adopted.
You're muted, Mr. Mayor.
I'm muted. Thank you, Councillor Kirk. Councillor Adrian Finlay, sorry. I thought I turned it on.
Yeah, I thought you was plugging me in there, Mark. Sorry,
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
No,
just regarding the annual town meeting, looking at the scenarios, Town Clerk, would one of those, would it be possible to have like an open Zoom, or would it be a closed Zoom with the normal protocol as regards to questions and invites? Thank you.
Annual council would be closed like this is. Annual town potentially could be open. The only thing I would say is that there have been councils that have been subject to, let's say, unwelcome contributions.
okay, thank you. Councillor Mark Anderson.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to comment on the annual town. I think if we go ahead, it's got to be done some way, form or fashion. And I guess the best way is for the clerk and the deputy town clerk and the 2 people mentioned, Councillor Burnham and Councillor Brooks, to organise that themselves the best way forward. But the comment I want to make is regarding the trees. I hear what the town clerk says. The only problem I have with it is the costings that East Lindsey will make, because we're not going out to tender. I know that East Lindsey will charge us the admin costs on top of the work. So without the competitive tender, are we getting value for money? I don't know, because they will lump on a huge amount of admin costs, which means it goes through East Lindsey District Council and you're paying from one department, another department, chief executive department, etc., 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 on top of the actual work that is being done. So that worries me as such, with the bill coming in, because we can't measure it against another bill for value for money. On the insurance update, can I just ask the question to the Deputy Town Clerk? Is it third party foreign theft, or is it fully comp on the vehicle quotes, insurance quotes that we've got? Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
It's fully comprehensive cover for any driver over 25 years old for the insurance.
Can I just respond to the first questions? We will get site. We've asked for the costs and how that's going to be put together from East Lindsey, so we will get sites, and there is an ongoing discussion. It's not it's not just a straight please do this, and yes, we will, and that's the end of it. There is an ongoing discussion between us and officers at East Lindsey. We need to bear in mind that the difficulty we face is actually dealing with these types of trees in what is a very difficult access area. So getting that machinery in, but also doing so at the same time, potentially that East Lindsey would be dealing with ash trees in there. So I think it is a sensible way forward, and it's one which will enable us to work together. And I think there are some benefits in trying to work together. I know that sometimes, I'm the first to admit that I'm critical of East Lindsey when at times when I think there needs to be criticism, but there has been quite a good relationship with the team that are managing the trees, and I think I've seen quite a change in approach from that we had early on, and as a result of that, I'm quite confident that we'll come out with a result which is overall beneficial to us. I know that it was very expensive just to get one limb off of a tree in Coronation Walk last year at short notice. So I know the sort of level that we would potentially be paying anyway on the if we go out to tender because of access arrangements there. So if it's done as part of a bigger piece of work, then there will be some economies of scale on that. And even if there are some additional costs, I think those will be offset by the saving.
Thank you. Councillor Steve Kirk, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's just regarding the insurance, I think it's a case of, as a young person would say, it is what it is. There's not a lot we can do about that. If the market isn't out there, we're very restricted to what we can actually do. So fully conscious across all those, yeah, I think we'll have to go with it. The annual town meeting is the one that causes me most concern, particularly if it's held as a Zoom type meeting. I'm more than happy to offer my services as a town clerk. So, as a former mayor, that's something I might have had. It may be that we have to do it Zoom, where all the information is out there well in advance, so members of the public get the opportunity to read it, and then they register to attend. Or it's even possible to do it as a webinar with written questions coming in. And in previous town meetings, we've had community groups speaking for a couple of minutes about what they do. So they could be guest speakers in a webinar, and there is that option to do that as an addition to Zoom. So I think there are various ways. I think it's important. It is our opportunity to communicate what we've been doing with the town, and also to get some feedback from them, because they don't tend to be hugely packed meetings, but if there's an issue of the day, they are well attended. So yeah, I'm more than happy to help out in any way that I can, but I think if we are going for the direct Zoom, it needs to be one where they can have all the documentation, but they do need to register their attendance in advance to be sent a link and the password, or alternatively have it more as an information sharing via a webinar platform, which I say is also available in Zoom. Just my observations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Billy Brooks, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Kirk beat me to it with the webinar kind of style, because I think you can control, I'm not sure, but I think you can, who has videos on, who has and mute and things like that, and who can unmute and whatever it might be. But then also I just had a question which I believe Councillor Anderson asked with regards to the insurance, what age it was, because sometimes you find within companies that they whack the insurance age of people that can drive the vehicles or the lawnmowers right up to, I don't know, say 30, and it's nice to see when it's a bit lower, 25, because it gives a younger person the chance to get experience with certain machinery and things like that. So it was, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Cunnington, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, there's two reports here tonight which stand out. There's the tree one and the insurance. In one way, they both tie themselves together. So I'd like to thank the clerk for what he's done, support the clerk in the proposals that he's got with those two. And I'd just like to ask that I understand we're in a contract with East Lindsey for obviously maintaining their share of the trees, which were done during the transfer period. And if we're struggling with contractors for our tree works, while we're expecting them to do their bit during their transfer period and within their remit that they've got to do, can we not come to some agreement that we can carry on a similar sort of thing using their contractors with them invoicing us? Because at the end of the day, if their contractors are in there, I don't know how far they're travelling, but they're going to be booking travelling time. And if they've got an hour travelling here with all the machinery that they need, all the costs that it has to run those machines, all the cutters, all the lifts, carting all the stuff away, we need transparency on this, and we need to know, and it needs to be transparent and clear. But we could save our work, if possible, to tie in with theirs while they've got the agreement that they have during the transfer, because some of those costs, traveling here, traveling back, the cost of machines and that, it's not a job that's going to come cheap anyway. So is there any chance our clerk could go one step further and try and tie us in with a contract with East Lindsey while we've got their period with us? Thank you.
Town clerk, please.
I mean, I think for this particular piece of work that I've set out, we know exactly what needs to be done. So for that piece of contract, that's why I have gone, and spoken to them, because of the difficulty in getting appropriate people, and they are tender. They will go through a procurement process, or a framework which has previously been tendered. But for the other work, we haven't yet determined what that is, so it's not that easy to do that. And this is specific works which are going on in areas that we own. So this isn't general work that is happening in Skegness. This is specific works that are happening to trees in Vine Walk and Coronation Walk, and relating to some ash trees. It's a small number at this moment in time, but as we know, that will get bigger. And we have some trees that need more urgent works in those. We've got the result of the tree surveys that we had, and that's indicated we need to take some action in the coming year on those trees. The other areas, the trees are in a less precarious state. There are a couple of trees that we will look at in a bit more detail, but for some, it's a matter of watching. It might be cutting back of the vines that are growing on them, the ivy that are growing on them, so that they become more visible for the next inspection that will happen next summer. So it's not that easy to say, oh yes, we've got this other work that we want to do, and does it tie in with work that East Lindsey are doing anyway? Clearly there may be an opportunity to do that, and if it's beneficial in the same way that it's been beneficial for the work on the walks, then that might be something worth pursuing. But I think in the longer term, with a bit more time, we can actually tender for a longer term contract. So a bit like having a select list of contractors, we would have perhaps one or two tree surgeons on that list that we can call down, and we know that we're going to get a a reasonable value for money job.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson, please.
Yeah, before I actually vote, I'm going to ask the town clerk, is he happy that the work on the trees in partnership with East Lindsey District Council's contractors, is he happy that that doesn't leave us open for challenge because we haven't gone down the route of procurement before we go to the vote, or I put my hand up or not regarding this?
The East Lindsey themselves have to go through the same process as we do, and legally there is the ability to get other local authorities to provide services on our behalf. Similarly, they could ask us to do work on their behalf, and we charge them. And as long as it goes through that authority, the authority that's actually procuring and paying for the work directly, as long as they've gone through due process, then that's absolutely fine. And obviously, we've got 9 district councillors on our council who will know that Lindsay will go through proper due process in terms of procuring works.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak? You've got the report in front of you and the recommendations, 3.1 A, B and C. Anybody wanting to move these? Councillor Cunnington.
Yeah, I'll move the proposal, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second the Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Billy Brooks. All in favour, please shout. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's meeting. Before we go, just remind you, it's good to see some of the news that we've hopefully reached the peak with this pandemic, but we must urge people still to take precaution, hands, face and space, and if we're any chance of getting a summer this year, then we all need to carry on with the hard work we've gone through for the last, again, 3 months. It's been nearly a year, but we're mentally, people are starting to struggle, and we still need to continue a bit longer. So thank you all for attending. Everybody out there who's watching, thank you. Stay safe. Thank you.